and speak to some of the details of the healthcare bill, which we're here to talk about today. So, one thing is I was campaigning throughout my district last year, and as I continue to speak with employers, small business people within my district and even many outside of my district, when I speak about creating jobs, hiring new employees, one of the things I hear consistently from employers is that uncertainty is one of the greatest barriers to hiring. And you hear that not just locally, but you hear that nationally. Events in the Middle East, Japan, the impact they have on the global economy create uncertainty. And one thing we've learned from the fragile recovery out of the Great Recession is that uncertainty delays hiring. This bill, which we've debated in the late hours, or early morning hours, I should say, this morning, and continue to debate this afternoon, creates great uncertainty, particularly for the 106,000 Vermonters who are part of self-insured plans here in Vermont. These are Vermonters, these are Vermont families who are employed by some of Vermont's largest employers, IBM, General Dynamics, General Electric, to name a few, and many others. And there are many employers you'd never hear of because they have a presence outside of Vermont, but they have employees in Vermont who are telecommuting. These employers have made it clear that the uncertainty presented in this bill represents a great risk to their business and to their hiring plans. What we're here to do today is to call on the governor and legislative leaders to promise these employers with self-funded plans that they will not have to pay for a system that their employees will not use. We've heard from the Shaw report, the proposal that was put before the legislature earlier this year, that employers could face a payroll tax of up to 11%, and employees could face a payroll tax of up to 3%, whether they use this publicly funded system or not. So again, we're here to call on the governor and legislative leaders to promise today that these employers and their employees will not be forced to pay into a system that they will not benefit from. I'd like to point out that we have a publicly funded system today. It's called Medicaid. It's broke and it's broken. We've flirted with a public-private partnership. It's called Catamount, and our governor earlier this year proposed dismantling it. Yet at the same time, when we're facing a broken publicly financed system, and there's been consideration of dismantling the existing public-private partnership we have, both systems which are underfunded and have been chronically underfunded for years, we find it a little ironic that the supermajority in the legislature, led by our governor, are pushing through a package of tax increases that will directly increase the cost of private health insurance here in Vermont. That is unacceptable. In closing, we recognize that this bill has a predetermined outcome. All we're asking for is a promise. promise that these employers and their employees will not have to pay for something they won't use. A promise that will give these employers the certainty they need to take into consideration when they look at their growth plans and work towards coming out of this very difficult recession. With that, happy to take any questions, and I think some of my colleagues here will have some comments as well.
Can I just add something? We worked last night long and hard, and as Oliver said, into the early hours to try and get answers to the many questions that our businesses were asking. The responses we got were mostly, we don't have those yet, we'll have those in a year or so. We heard this morning from the director of IBM's government relations that just adds to their uncertainty, adds to their angst, and continues, as Oliver says, to make things uncertain for our businesses. And that's another reason why we're asking for this promise. We don't want this to go on without answers. And that's all I got for you, Matt. Anything? Pretty much talked out this morning.
I think it's worth noting, I had constituents who said, I hope that, unlike the Congress, I hope to see some working together, looking at compromises, and that the parties will work together on making this better. We have offered amendments. We've offered one amendment where one of the members of the committee who voted for the bill got up last night and said, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is the evidence that, in fact, we're not going beyond the point of no return. And therefore, I am supporting this amendment. That clearly was a middle-of-the-road option where we're saying we're going to prevent going beyond the point of no return on the risks that we're taking. He stood up and spoke and agreed. That amendment would have prevented us from going beyond the point of no return, which is what is so frightening to our businesses if this system fails. That effort was rejected.
How do you define the point of no return?
Insurers leaving our state and not coming back if, in fact, the system that we're presenting and proposing does not succeed. Because we cut them out early on in the process.
One thing I've heard from some of the proponents is that they want to try to lump in the ERISA employers because if they can get a waiver, because the overall system is going to depend on their participation in order to be have any chance of being financially viable.
When they make the comment.
We got two economic problems that are going to hit us. It's not only the exit of the insurance companies, but we could face a much worse one, and that's the exit of our bigger employers, IBM, GE. Yeah, we all have to remember that IBM, GE, GF Goodrich, all those companies compete globally, and they compete against each other. I had a 2-hour meeting with GE Monday. They made it quite clear to me that they compete against other GE plants in Lynn, Mass, and there are other plants throughout the country. If we make this plant too expensive to operate here, there isn't anything in that warehouse or anything in that industrial complex that can't be put on a flatbed truck and moved to someplace else. And we really do have to worry about that, because if that leaves, or any of these big employers of ours leave, that is just going to exuberate Vermont's financial problems and make our health insurance problems worse, because they won't be paying into it either. So.
Well, let's
Talk about
make
Michigan, what was said last night.
Let's make something clear. You asked about a waiver from ERISA. There is no such thing. To get a waiver from ERISA, it takes an act of Congress, and they're not about to do that. The answer I got last night from Representative Larson was that he feels, and the committee feels, that the bill is in full compliance with ERISA. By that, what they mean is the plan is to tax all employers, although there's denial at the same time that there is a plan that's to be developed and revealed after the next election. I suggest that's deliberate. And then ERISA employers will be put to the test. They will either join the state program that they're paying for, or they will maintain their existing policy plus pay the tax. So they're being threatened with paying twice. I suspect that a number of them are not going to put up with that. And if they walk, it's because this legislature has invited them to do that.
Some of the proponents, Commissioner Kimball, I know the governor even said that, say, what if a plan can be designed that's attractive to these employers and they buy in and it's cheaper than sort of the basic benefits package they might provide their employers now, or their employees now, and therefore they actually might save money, and then they can choose as a self-insured company to buy supplemental insurance. And Commissioner Kimball mentioned that's what IBM in Canada does. They buy into the federal system and they buy additional supplemental wraparound services. Is that?
You said the words, what if?
Well, a lot of words. That's what I'm saying. Or since we're all talking hypotheticals, I'm going to throw one at you too. So
this is
from
what
their side,
Representative Olson,
Yeah.
this is the point that Representative Olson wanted to make when he called this news conference. The uncertainty is detrimental to our economy.